Welcome back to Dave's Workshop. So now we're going to get into the real meat of working on the A-10. In this episode, episode 2, we're going to cover removing decals. We're going to cover fixing some of the hanger rash that this airplane's had, some of the damage it's had. We're going to talk about panel lines. We're going to look at some of the products that I like to use to do filling and surface prep. We're going to talk about really getting this thing ready for paint. And that includes covering it with a polyacryl. I'll show you some of the tools that I like to use, as well as those products. So with that, let's get into the project.
So one of the things I do when I'm working on a project like this is I go through it and I photograph all the locations of the decals so that as I take the decals off, I'll know where the new ones go without having to do a lot of re-referencing. Here's one of the boo-boos I was talking about, and you can see it's really pretty small. So we're just going to take a little bit of filler, fill that in, sand it lightly, and try to blend that back in. This plane had a couple of rough landings, and you can see here on the underneath side of the tail, we've got a couple of places we'll have to fix. And again, we'll just use some lightweight filler. We'll blend that in, sand it lightly, and bring it back to the right shape before we clear coat. Typically what I use for filling is this Hobby Light filler from Hobbyco. It fills quick, it dries quickly. So if I'm making a mix to slurry on the wings of the fuselage to fill in the open cells, it's generally filled and dry by the time I get to the other end of the wing, so I can go right back into sanding. Now I'm going to try working with this spackle that I picked up at the hardware store. It advertises that it has the same easy, quick drying nature and non-shrink. So that's the important thing. You have to make sure this stuff is non-shrink filler, because a lot of stuff that you get now is it's a vinyl compound. It shrinks a little bit and it's rubbery and does not sand well. So either of these two things will work. For sure the stuff from Hobbyco is going to work, and then we'll try some of this Red Devil stuff as well. On the back of the canopy, you'll see that this back edge doesn't glue down completely. And what I have found is that if we push it down, we can get it to seal, but there's always going to be a place open. I'm not too concerned about this place being open back in here, because one of the things you'll wind up doing, if you don't have a way for air to escape on a hot day in the sun, you can pop the whole canopy loose. So we'll get this one edge pushed back in and glued back down, but we're going to leave this back here open to allow for air to expand it and escape. Now here you can see we've taken some of the decals off, and some of the decals that are in the paint, or this little blue trim up here. And that looks kind of ugly right now, and it's got a little bit of a rough feel to it in here, but we're not going to worry about that. We're going to sand that out with a little bit of 220 just to blend it a little bit, and then once we've covered this thing with clear coat, we'll come back and prime that just a little bit just to even that out. Now when I'm taking off the decals, I'll use an X-Acto blade, and I'll use an old X-Acto blade, or in this case I like to use the back of the X-Acto blade to lift those edges up, and that helps me pull these off without gouging the foam, without poking holes where I don't want them, and creating more problems than what I started with. So you can take that X-Acto knife, get things started, and just slide it out underneath that decal, and it pulls it up pretty slick. I found this really interesting. So underneath this decal right here, pull that decal off, and then underneath, this area is actually recessed in a pattern that, it's the same pattern here. So we're just going to, when we redo this, leave this as is and not put a decal over that, but we're just going to go back in and paint those features back into these recessed areas, and that's going to look a lot better than a decal stuck over the top of it. So I found a couple more instances of this nice recessed work in here that has stickers over the top of it, or decals over the top. And we'll pull this off, and when we come back, we're going to fill these with gunmetal gray, not necessarily black. Black is usually too dark, so we'll go with a gunmetal gray, and that'll give it that nice shading fixture that we want to see. Now also, this is a great place to look at this piece on the wing here, where you have this great feature that allows, when the wings are plugged in, it automatically connects the ailerons and flaps and retracts. We want to make sure that we keep anything out of this area because there's a little exposed circuit board down in here. So when we get ready to do the painting and the clear coating, we're just going to put tape across this whole area, keep anything out of that from the very get-go. Now, as you're taping off the canopy, one of the things you'll want to make sure you do is start at the bottom and work your way to the top. And what that does is it creates a seal so that overspray and drips don't go underneath your tape, they go across the top of your tape. Seems obvious, but some people kind of miss that, and then all of a sudden they have little dribbles that go underneath their tape. And the thing is with the tape, we're not pushing it down all that hard. We're not making this a full contact thing. We're just creating a barrier is all between the spray and the canopy. So here we've got a wingtip light, and I have two favorite tools that I use when I'm doing some of this detailing work with the tape. So, and that's just these craft sticks, popsicle sticks, whatever you want to call them. And then I also use the bamboo skewers. These things have hundreds of uses in the shop. I built airplanes using these, and especially the bamboo, as a replacement for carbon fiber. It's light, it bends well, extremely strong, but it also has a nice good point on it for going around the tape. So I'll go around the tape and I kind of worry the tape as I punch it into those seams because I want, this is an actual working light, so we're trying to keep this sealed nicely and yet have a nice clean line on the paint. So I'll use this bamboo tip to kind of worry that tape a little bit. And then as we peel it off, that tape will stick down into those crevices. Now you can also use an X-Acto knife to cut it loose, but you really want to get that bamboo in there first to get that to stick down in that little crevice, so that when you do peel it off, you get a nice clean peel. So now I've got a nice clean line around this light, but again, you have to be careful because these lights are glued in there, and you just want to make sure that as you're peeling this stuff out and taking it off, don't pull that light all the way out of the foam. You have to re-glue it. It's not a big deal, but it's just easier to not have to do that in the first place. One thing that's important to keep in mind, and I probably should have mentioned this early on, is when you're working on foam airplanes, especially on things with protrusions and you've got antennas and things you're trying to protect, make sure you work on a piece of foam. You can get this down at Walmart. It's 3/4 inch foam, costs $8 or $10, whatever. Definitely worth the headache of not having to patch holes and bumps and dings in your airplane. You want to keep as much hanger rash off as possible. Here I've got a ding I'm going to need to fill, and in addition to this foam, I usually go down and get those foam cushions from couches and things like that at the secondhand store, at the dollar store, at the Goodwill, wherever, and bring them back, and I take the covering off, so I'm just left with 4-inch foam, and that allows us to support the piece above the workbench, especially when we're doing painting. It gets us above these other surfaces. But you have to watch out for things like pitot tubes, antennas, and just be very careful as you're doing this that you're not creating more problems as you go along. It's fairly hard to see here, and depending on the light, how we change the light, it might show a little bit better. But we have this long crease here, a little bit of hanger rash that's happened here, much the same as it has on the fuselage. So what we're going to do is we're going to clean that, and we're going to fill that with a lightweight filler. Here we have our wing. We've done a lot of the prep work. We've covered up the electronics out here, so we'll keep the spray, things out of that. We're going to start working on this dent that's right here. Now, I talked earlier about two of my favorite tools being the popsicle stick and the bamboo skewer. My other favorite tool is a pack of cards. It's a regular pack of cards. These things are great. So You can use cards for spreading. You can use them for this very fine wiping because they do conform. I also use these when I'm mixing epoxy. I mix my epoxy on the card, get it ready to go, use it, and then just chuck this. It's you can go down to the casino and get a bag full of these decks of cards, and that's where I got this one. And I got a bag full for nothing. They give them away because after they've been used several times, they dump the decks, get new decks. A lot of the decks you'll see from the casinos will have a hole punched in them. But a deck of cards will last you a long time, and they're useful for just so many things. So get yourself a pack of cards, some skewers and popsicle sticks, and you'd be amazed what you can do. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start with some of this lightweight filler, and we're going to come in here and start working it into that crack. Well, it's not a crack, it's a dent. It's just a little dent. You'll see it start to form there. We've got another one out here in the wing. We're going to put a little bit into that. So we've got some filler. Again, this is the Hobby Co. lightweight filler. All right, like that. And now we're going to take our card. One of the things you can do is kind of wet the edge of the card, and that helps as well. So we're going to hold that down, and we're going to come across that. All right. Get nice and smooth, just like that. Okay, so you don't have a lot. If you wet that edge, it'll keep it from dragging and scuffing the filler. So we'll wet that edge again. I just use a little spit. You can just, whatever, it's just my shop. And then come back out here to this other one, spread it across, go the other direction on it. I didn't quite get it wet enough. Now you can also wet the filler itself. And get the filler just a little more creamy. And that works too. I find that it tends to get a little drizzly if you do that. Now the great thing about the cards, they've got 4 edges. And actually if you want to flip them, they've got 8 edges. So you can get these things really nice and smooth. And that's going to eliminate a lot of sanding later. Now, here we have a panel line that comes through. What we're going to do is we're going to stick this card in here, and run across that panel line, and, oh, we'll have to do it again. What we're going to do is we're going to reaffirm this panel line using this card. So, I got it a little bit off. Let's try that one more time. Let's get a new card that hasn't been wetted. So we're going to put that panel line back in using this card very carefully. Draw that back across and pull it straight out. Boom! Now your panel line is in there. When we do a little bit of sanding with 220, a little bit of that panel line is going to stay there. So it's going to save us from having to come back in with a scribe and scribing that back in later. Now, using the same materials and the same techniques that we used on the wing, we're going to come back here and we're going to work on the fuselage. So the top surface of this tends to get a little dry in between applications, so just go ahead and mix it up a little bit using your handy dandy popsicle stick, and we're going to come across this and lay that in just like that. Okay. We're not going to go too far, but we're going to have to get far enough that we get on either side of the damage here. Now, one thing you might notice is one of the decals I've left on here is this little red, white, black circle decal. And the reason I left that on is because, well, it's going to be cool. And I've done this before on other planes where I've gone down to the dollar store and you get a package of stickers that's up for $1 at the dollar store. And they have different shapes, squares and circles and so on. And you put them on your airplane as access hatches. So you put those down, hit it with the clear coat, and start painting, and when you're done you have this nice looking access panel. Okay, we've zoomed in a little bit. Let's see if we can clean this up just a smidge with the card so we'll have less sanding. Yeah, that's going to work nice. So, use another card to wipe off on. And again, we're going to come through and reestablish this panel line that's here. That one. And we're going to clean. Now you can also do it with the tip of your bamboo skewer. Come through. Yeah, you know, and I've done that in the past, but since I started doing it with the card, it just seems to work nicer. So let's do that again. And you see I've refilled in this other panel line that we just cleaned up. Add a little more right there. Come upstream of our wipe. Get in a little bit. Okay, oops. Let's go like that. Okay, let's bring this down. That. Like that. Now what I may do on this one, we'll get this panel line reestablished here. But let's leave this other panel line here for later, I think, after we've sanded, because we're going to sand in this direction. We'll come back through with a scribe and we'll scribe that panel line back in. As I've said, one of the things we're trying to do is to create a nice hard finish on this. And what I use is the polycryl by Minwax. It's water-based, so it's nice. It doesn't have that horrible smell. I like this stuff. I have the clear satin spray, and then I have the satin finish in brush on. Both have their purposes. For this airplane, we're probably going to use mostly the spray. We're going to put in multiple layers on this. It's not just enough to get one layer to seal this. We want to build up a hard shell. Now, yeah, it'll add some weight. But the idea is to give us a nice hard finish to work on. So you can consider probably 4 to 6 coats of this. And in addition to giving a nice hard finish, what it's going to do is it's going to seal the surface in case we have any leakage and we're using a paint that may try to eat foam. Now, the paint I'm going to use does not do that. I use a latex paint on flat finishes. You can get them mixed to whatever color you want. In the hardware store, the spray cans of paint, you're very limited to what you can do. Now, if you're doing a foam sport plane, by all means, use spray paint. It's great. Just add the can. But what we're going to do is a little bit different. Again, hard coat, clear polycryl, and we'll get this airplane ready to go. Again, still have some sanding to do. We'll get that done as soon as it's dry. But while that's drying, we'll move on to clear coating some of the other pieces. So this is the repair to the wing that we did on that little bit of hanger rash. Again, I'll use my little foam tool here, my little flexible sanding tool, 220 grit, and we're just going to smooth this out. I'm not going to be real aggressive. We'll smooth that out. Once I get it smooth, we'll go in a circular motion like that. Your hands are going to tell you a lot more than what your eyes can tell you. So run your fingertips across that. And I can feel there's still a little bit of a problem right here. So we'll wipe that off. We'll come back in with some more filler and do that again. All right, we've done some sanding on that wing repair. In a couple of places here. So if you look at it, and grab another bamboo skewer here. Kind of open this up here a little bit. Okay, that looks good. So you can see that the repair is coming along pretty nicely. So now this just needs a wipe down and we can do a clear coat. So we've got our wings ready to go here. We've had one coat of polycryl. Actually, we have 2 coats of polycryl. And I give them a 30-minute in between each coat. That's what polycryl recommends. Turn that around a little bit. And polycryl recommends at least 3 coats. We're going to go probably 4 coats. As I look at this, I can still see some of the open foam, open cell
foam structure in here. There's a couple of places that I missed for repairs, but this is the bottom of the wing, so I'm not too terribly concerned about that. I'd be more concerned about the top, and actually I spent more time on the top. So we'll give this a second coat, actually the third coat of clear. And if you don't get these coats of clear down within about 30 minutes, the company recommends that you wait 72 hours. So I go ahead and spray, and then I come back after 30 minutes and I make sure I set a timer to make sure I get things right, and give it that other coat so you can keep the process going here. And you'll notice as you start to build coats, things start to even out, but you'll also start to see where there are problems. In some cases, you just kind of have to ignore that a little bit, because we'll get to those problems as we get into primer and paint. Right now, all we're trying to do is to get a nice seal on the foam. Okay. Yes, this airplane's seen a little bit of use. There's some marks where you can see where some gravel has come through, and some scuff marks. But when we get this thing done, it's going to look good, especially from 10 feet away. In the sky, it's going to look awesome. In the same way that we work on the wings, we're going to work on the fuselage, starting with the bottom. Now, I didn't take this decal off the front. I started to, but it was such a delicate decal that I started tearing up things. So what I'm going to do with that decal on the nose is we're going to get a good coat of clear on it, and then using primer, I'm just going to feather in the edges so that decal doesn't show. So again, what we're trying to do here is a nice seal. I have stuffed the insides of the nacelles with paper. I'm going to keep spray out of the fans. I'm not worried about overspray in this forward part, because I can go back in with a brush and the paint, or a airbrush, and fix that. So I'm not too worried about that. Now, while everything's dry, we're going to let this sit for about 24 hours. We're going to flip it. We're going to do the same procedure on the top surfaces. And then as soon as that's done, we're going to go right into finish prep work for the paint scheme. So we're going to go around and primer some areas, give that a little final sand, and then we're going to start shooting some paint. And on the next installment, I'll talk about the paint I use and how I change the formula for latex paint to make it more viscous for shooting onto projects like this. So again, see you at the flying field.